She has given us no choice. We must kill her before she becomes another Jobu Topake. I think we should do something weird. It helps her fight. It gives her power.
You're the reason my daughter doesn't call anymore. Why she drop out of college and gets tattoos?
I got bored one day, and I put everything on a bagel.
What? Rakakuni. You know the one with the chef? And he makes bad food. Pui. And then this raccoon sit on his head. Ooh, control him. And then he cooks good food.
Do you mean Ratatouille?
The thing I do know is that we have to be kind. Please, be kind.
Even in a stupid universe where we have hot dogs for fingers, we get very good with our feet.
Welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi, with me, James.
And me, Matt. Every series on this podcast, we explore the world of science fiction cinema by taking a trip through a different subgenre of sci-fi.
Today we have a special bonus episode for you. So back in June last year on our Patreon channel, we covered Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, from directing duo The Daniels. Now it's safe to say we fell in love with the film back then, but as it swept the Oscars last night, winning a whopping 7 awards, we decided to share it with you here on the main feed. So strap in and get ready for multiversal mayhem as we discuss Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
James and I have both watched the new massive hit sci-fi movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. So we're covering that today because, it's kind of one of the biggest sci-fi films out at the moment, isn't it, James?
Yeah, it's really made an impact, and I wouldn't be surprised if it gets an Oscar or two. I will be hoping that it gets an Oscar or two when award season comes around, but it's been sort of it's been everywhere all at once, hasn't it? It's just been such a big film, and it seems like it's come out of nowhere a little bit because it's this small, it's relatively small in terms of budget, and it's an independent film. It's from A24, and it just seems to have made this big impact with everyone that I know who's seen it. Popular with the film fans, isn't it? Critically acclaimed already, I would say, from what I've seen. You just said you hope it gets an Oscar nomination. That's a really interesting thought that hadn't really crossed my mind, because this is not really an Oscar bait film. Certainly not Oscar bait, but it's not the kind of film that the Academy would go for, really. But it's definitely deserving in a number of categories, I would say, for a nomination. Yeah, definitely. And I think if you look at sort of the big blockbuster films that end up getting Oscar awards and stuff, I think this can definitely compete with them. I mean, it's competing with a lot of the there's another big multiverse film that came out at a similar time, which I'm sure we'll get into, but it's competing with those kind of big heavy hitters.
Mrs. Wang. Mrs. Wang.
Mrs. Wang, are you with us?
I am paying attention.
Now, you may only see a pile of receipts, but I see a story. I can see where this story is going. It does not look good.
So Everything Everywhere All at Once 2022, this year, of course, as we are recording it, directed by Dan Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, I think it is, or just Daniels, directed by Daniels, as they seem to go by. James, I know you've watched a recap video before we started recording. Do you want to give a very short overview of the plot to set the scene for us?
Well, I will attempt to, but first off, I'll just tell you what the official IMDb synopsis was when they were keeping it under wraps.
Oh, right, okay.
And they literally just put, apparently, a woman tries to do her taxes.
That's good.
Brilliant.
Okay.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, that's nice.
So that was the original one. So basically this film at its core is a family drama, but amongst that, there's multiverse madness going on. It's all over the place. It is everything, everywhere, all at once. All of these things are happening, but at its core, it's about a family and a mother and daughter trying to have a relationship and deal with all of life's struggles. I would say that's the core of what this film's about.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Slightly misleading description of the film, but I also don't disagree with what you say.
I mean, there's a whole lot more in there.
Yeah.
And there is a woman trying to do her taxes.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you familiar with the Daniels or not? Are they the Daniels or just Daniels?
I think the Daniels is kind of what the most of the interviews and stuff they've been referred to as by both the cast and other people. And yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? But they've got quite a bond, these two guys. And they worked on Swiss Army Man as well beforehand, which is their other sort of like big film with Daniel Radcliffe. And that was it's such a mental film. It's basically a guy going around with a dead body and then all of this crazy stuff happening. So that was their other big film. Have you seen that one?
Maybe. It rings a bell now. I didn't think I had because I don't recognise the title, but it's like, has he got his, he's got his like best mate who's dead, but he's also become like his imaginary friend?
Yeah.
Maybe.
And they do there's loads of like crazy fantasy scenes that keep happening throughout and that kind of stuff. Like I think there's one moment where he's riding him across a river or a sea and he's being propelled by the dead body's flatulence.
Reminds me of Sleeper with Woody Allen when they're skating on the water.
It's got that kind of vibe.
Maybe I haven't seen that. Maybe I've just seen a trailer. But I feel like I would remember that scene.
So that's their other big film, but they're also known for doing music videos as well.
Oh, that's not surprising, is it?
Yeah, you can definitely tell, and it's kind of like the kinetic language that they use in this film is very present in their music videos. Like one of the ones which I'd seen previously was there's a song by DJ Snake and Lil Jon called Turn Down for What, which you probably would recognize if it came on.
Absolutely, yeah.
And in that video, they're having like some sort of crazy dance off fight, and then they go through different floors and stuff, and it's mental. There's lots of crazy stuff going on. You can tell it's them if you watch that music video.
Oh, that's cool.
It's got all of their DNA on. So yeah, like they've come from that music video background. And again, that's very similar to Michel Gondry, who I think is basically a lot of inspiration for these guys, because you look at Eternal Sunshine and Michel Gondry had done lots of music videos beforehand and he brought all of that knowledge into this smaller sci-fi film. And that's what the Daniels have done here.
I think there's some definite, I think you're right. They are inspired by Michel Gondry. I think there's some definite links between this and Eternal Sunshine. It really reminded me of it in places and they're obviously very different types of film, but the way that the plot kind of flicks through settings and scenes inside Joel's mind, and things are kind of like deconstructing along the way. There's a reality hopping element to that, isn't there? You know, it's all internal and within Joel's mind, and it's distinct memories, but each memory is distinct and separate, and it's like a different alternate reality that they kind of hop through. And you know, he's dragging Clementine by the hand into like, and now they're in the reality where it's Joel's mother's kitchen, and he's a child. You know,
yeah,
there was something about that there, and I think there's a definite link there.
Yeah, it's that kind of use of space, isn't it? And going into other worlds through the sort of the cinematography and the editing. And I mean, one of the things they've talked about is I think I watched one interview and they were talking about how they wanted the editing to look realistic as well. So it's all sort of like, it is all done through, well, the majority of it is practical effects. So they've got lots of practical effects in here. And I mean, they've got such a small team working on this. It's crazy. They've got, I think I read that there was 5 people in their VFX team and there's 500 VFX shots in the entire film.
God.
So you look at like your average credits for a film, the amount of people doing the VFX is crazy. But this is so stripped back. And I mean, they've really gone sort of like guerrilla filming with this as well. I mean, I think Dan Kwan was going around with a pocket camera, a 4K pocket camera, to film a bunch of the stock footage for some of the scenes where Michelle Yeoh's going through all of these different dimensions and universes. And it's really interesting that they've gone to those kind of like grassroots in order to make it.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And it's a really, I mean, it's reflected in the numbers. The budget was, 25 million. Compare with our other big multiverse movie, Doctor Strange 2, which was 200 million. So we're talking 8 times one eighth of the budget of a comparable movie. I wanted to ask you, because you've seen that and I haven't, so kind of without spoiling anything, how does it compare to that other big multiverse movie?
So for me, this is far superior. I mean, I did enjoy the Doctor Strange film. I mean, it's had very mixed reviews from people. But with that, I feel like because it is a Marvel film as well, and because of the success of like the latest Spider-Man film and all of the stuff that they used in that with the nostalgia aspects of bringing back the older actors and things like that, people are expecting all of that in the next Doctor Strange film. And it's hard to deliver that again. So I think it's got all of that like weight, which is bringing it down. And I mean, it's a fun film. There's aspects of it which I really enjoyed. But I think this deals with multiverse and the ridiculous nature of that as a concept in film in a much better way.
The ridiculous nature of it, I agree. I was very struck with how this film gets to quite a complete position on the concept of alternate dimensions, alternate realities, and multiverses. It's funny that we exclusively say multiverse now because of comic books, whereas we would refer to this genre as alternate reality fiction. 10 years ago, comics have been doing it since at least the 80s, haven't they? But because comics have now taken over popular culture, we've adopted the language into the rest of cinema. But the characters refer to it as multiversal, don't they? Waymond, when he's explaining it to Evelyn, talks about the multiverse as a sort of collective term for where they are. And he's from the Alphaverse. So they've got that verse terminology. Anyway, I digress. The way that this film takes the concept of a multiverse, introduces us as an audience to that concept, and then gets the characters to this point of like a total experience of the multiverse. So it's not just like Crisis on Two Earths. The Flash has bumped into one single other instance of the Flash, like a Fringe made 5 seasons out of just hanging out with one other alternate dimension. And a lot of, I think, alternate reality fiction tends to get stuck on one or maybe two or maybe a small handful of alternate realities. This film not only tries to explore the concept of everything everywhere, the concept of all possible realities, but then also gets us to a position of like the psychological impact that has on characters that are experiencing all of that. So I was just really amazed, basically, that it managed to get all the way down the road of alternate reality fiction to a very well thought out end point of nihilism and existentialism.
Yeah, it's really like it's amazing the way they've been able to do that and get all of that stuff in so tightly, because we talked about Loki previously on the Patreon feed, and I mean that's got multiverse stuff in, and we struggled to talk about that film just because that TV series rather, because there's so much to it and they're trying to do so much. The basic principle is still the same. Like, you've got different branches of reality when someone does something different and then something else happens, and then you could end up with a completely different universe because of it, because of all these different butterfly effects of things happening. But with this, they have all of that, and they make it I don't know why, but it seems more, you can understand it in a better way. Like even the way that they jump between the universes. And I love the way that they do this is they have the characters do the most ridiculous things, which are so out of character, so that when they sort of plug in using their special Bluetooth headset, which puts them into the other universe, they manage to go further away into a different universe where things are like stranger. So you get to one where Michelle Yeoh's a martial artist, or then she's a chef, and there's lots of different ways she can get there, and it gets more and more ridiculous, the things that she has to do in order to get to these personalities, these versions of herself which have these special abilities.
And that ridiculousness is critical to the other side of it. So I was saying they get to this well-defined point of nihilism and existentialism, but there's also a huge amount of comedy, isn't there? The tone of the film is, without wanting to do it down, all over the place. It is comedy. It is, you were describing it as a family drama at the start, and it's sci-fi martial arts action in there, but the comedy aspect is really important, and they never lose sight of it. But it's married up with all of those other concepts as well, because that's part of that well thought out end point of alternate realities, is that yes, we'll get to a point where it feels like nothing possibly matters because everything's happening all the time, but at the same time, if everything's happening, then a lot of it will be ridiculous and silly, and we can have some fun with that as a film and put a load of jokes in with hot dog fingers and raccoon. What was it? Raccoony?
Raccoony or something like that, isn't it? Who's Randy Newman is the voice, apparently.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Which is hilarious. I love that little subtle sort of Pixar reference in having Randy Newman do it. But yeah, you're right. It is such a mixture of genres in this film. And that's what I love about good sci-fi, is that it can be all these different genres thrown into one, but it's under the sci-fi umbrella because of these fantastical things that are happening. And this film has a bit of everything that I want from a film. It's got the comedy aspects. It's got those crazy martial arts action scenes. It's got the sci-fi explanations and craziness going on. It's like a deeply moving drama. And that's why I love it so much, is because it has all of those parts in, but none of them seem forced. I mean, it goes through these ridiculous things that happen, like the hot dog fingers and all of this kind of stuff. And it is ridiculous and silly, but at the same time, you're going through all those emotions, like laughing at it. And then the next minute, you're really like, you're in an action scene and it's exciting. And then another moment, you're a bit sad and emotional because of what's happening to this family and what's going on in the actual plot of the film. Yeah,
it's interesting that it has all those moving moments as well, isn't it? Because another thing that I thought was quite impressive about the way it was scripted was, and it's also tied up to this idea that it's a very fully formed idea of a multiverse, is that those moving parts were also built into the comedy aspects. So the hot dog fingers universe and the Raccoony universe being the main two like really silly ones, but they both had like a fairly complete narrative arc for those universes. Where the Daniels have obviously said, well, this is funny and we can get visual comedy out of it, but we also want to show like how alternate realities work, which means that though it looks silly to us, there are people who live in that universe who are living real full lives, and therefore, you know, we can have some fun with the raccoon, but if the raccoon gets taken away, that's actually quite heartbreaking for the chef character, and then there needs to be some resolution there, and it's actually like, and it's just well directed as well, those scenes, to give it some sort of emotional heft without losing how funny it is that they're kind of like riding on each other's shoulders, Michelle Yeoh and the other chef, and all of that. But it gives it that kind of like complete, very small but complete narrative arcs for those silly universes that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and I think they all add something to the core story as well, don't they? Because if you look at the hot dog universe, where they've all got hot dog fingers, and you're seeing Michelle Yeoh's character Evelyn in a relationship with Jamie Lee Curtis's character of Deirdre, and those two are opposed to each other in their current reality, in Evelyn's reality. Yet in this other universe, they're together, they're in a relationship. So with her being able to see that by sort of constantly universe hopping, she can see that other side of Deirdre and then has a different connection to her. And that's sort of like, and even like that changes her fighting style later on, because throughout the film, she's using all this crazy like martial arts and having these extreme fights. But then towards the end, she's using all of her knowledge of people in the different universes to fight in a different way. She's setting them up for kisses and fixing people's backs and stuff and doing all this stuff to make them happier in their lives, which is another like fascinating way of putting things together towards the end.
Yeah, it is. You were just talking about the way she gets changing her fighting style, and that's an important kind of dimension of the film. It basically is a superhero movie, isn't it? Like Evelyn is a superhero character, isn't she? We're seeing her. It's an origin story movie, isn't it? She gets her powers, she learns how to use her powers, and it allows her to overcome the villains and the enemies that she's faced with.
Yeah, and she's the kind of character who when she gets the powers is so it's so important, just like her background beforehand, because she is someone who has lots of hobbies. She tries lots of things on to try and find something which works. Yet she never sticks to any of them long enough to become truly successful in the ways that her other multiverse selves have done. So but because of all of that, because of the way her life is, and it may not be the way that she wants it, and she's visibly sad and depressed about that, but because of all of that, it allows her to become this multiversal superhero.
Yeah, and then we essentially have the supervillain character in Jobu Tupaki. Is that how you say it? Jobu Tupaki?
Yeah. So apparently, I think one of the Daniels were trying to name their kids with their wife and were coming up with like weird names that could potentially work, or they were just making weird sounds, and then Jobu Tupaki came out of whatever they were doing there. So I thought that was quite interesting. It's such a weird combination of words, but it's so defining, isn't it? There's this like mysterious name and this mysterious person throughout the first half of the film.
Yeah, it sounds like a movie villain, doesn't it? And that's all it really needs to do. It's not explained anymore in the film, is it?
No, that's literally all we get.
And we have a whole supervillain origin story for Jobu Tupaki. It's Evelyn's daughter from the what Wayman calls the Alphaverse, the Alpha Evelyn's daughter Joy, who's been experimented on. This part was a little bit glossed over, I thought, but we don't. This Alpha Evelyn is dead at the start of the film, so she's off screen, but. There's quite a dark edge to her, right? She's been forcing her daughter to go further and further with multiverse experiments.
Yeah, and that kind of like, it does parallel Evelyn's own character, doesn't it? Because she's trying to force her Joy into being what she wants her to be and what she thinks she should be. So even stuff where, well, what the main instance of that is at the laundromat where she doesn't introduce Joy's girlfriend as her girlfriend. She just says, this is her friend. And she's very much like, you can't tell any of our family that you are gay. And she's like pushing that on her. So it's kind of that similar. So it's to a different extreme in this Alphaverse, isn't it? That she's literally making her into what she wants her to be by putting her through these experiments.
Yeah. Just the kind of common thread of Evelyn's across the multiverse being that they're not terrific parents, I guess. Yeah, basically make a lot of mistakes with their daughter, and that's what she's overcoming in this film. But it takes the entirety of the multiverse's Evelyn's and the entirety of the multiverse's Joys to kind of bridge that gap between mother and daughter. And that I really like that aspect of the film, because that is the emotional core of the film, is the mother-daughter relationship between all Evelyns and all Joys. And that's much more interesting than just having like a superhero and a supervillain with these powers, and actually making it about a mother and daughter bridging a gap of emotional distance and awkwardness between them is what allows it to be a satisfying movie, despite all the silliness, or, you know, because of all the silliness, in conjunction with the silliness.
Yeah, and it's like going back to Doctor Strange 2, in that film, they've got a love story running through it, but it just doesn't have the same weight that this does, because it's so well-rounded and well put together, this relationship between Evelyn and her daughter, and you're in it the entire time. And because they are both like deeply sad, aren't they, for a lot of it? They've got things that are going wrong in their lives, and they're sort of trying to come to terms with them and build that relationship again with each other.
I really like the way the whole trajectory of the film goes on a course of, like, they have these big problems in their relationship, but they have big problems in their relationship, but then we learn of an existential threat to the entire multiverse, so their problems become seemingly quite small in comparison. And then we go through a whole trajectory of nihilism where none of the problems that anyone has seem to matter, including the entire possible death of the multiverse rather. And then once we get to that point, we can then come back into the relationship and the problems in the relationship. Once again, the end of the film is those are the most important problems that the characters face. That whole trajectory is what I was talking about when I was saying that it's an incredibly well-developed position on the multiverse, because it allows you to take this domestic family narrative and go on a whole multiverse trajectory with it, and then come back to the same point and use that arc to explore the emotional relationship, which is why just that final the scene in the car park. And I'm not even sure which universe it's in. It's not in the original universe, I don't think. It's in one of the adjacent ones. But it doesn't matter at that point, because they can hop and they're experiencing everything. But we see the showdown, as it were, take place in that car park, because it feels so small and it looks like the start of the movie. It's not multiversal. And we have that very emotional conversation between them that basically resolves the entire plot. It just packs a hell of a punch, doesn't it, emotionally, to wind your film up that way. Yeah,
it's really powerful. And I mean, all of the way that they sort of symbolize these things as well is very clever. Like you talked about the sort of the multiversal crisis that is happening. And that is because Joy has created this bagel which has everything on it that you can think of. It's everything, like it's got dogs, cats, it's got all of our hopes and dreams. Everything is on this bagel. And I found that like it seems like a ridiculous concept, but apparently as well, there's a guy called Howard Bloom who has theorized that the universe would look like a bagel, just in terms of sort of like the structure of it. I don't know exactly the ins and outs. I'm not a scientist. I've established that many times on the podcast. But there's like a hole in the middle of the universe where it all sort of like, there's like and I don't know exactly, but you can look up diagrams of this and it's like a bagel. So that was like another sort of interesting thing that they've put in there, because it just seems like such a ridiculous thing, but it's there. And also sort of how that juxtaposes the googly eyes, which we see throughout, because you've got the bagel, which is dark and has like a tiny white center, and then the googly eyes, the reverse. The googly eyes are like the sort of symbol, they give life to stuff, don't they? Whereas this bagel is taking life away. And the googly eyes sort of like, there's that moment where Evelyn puts on the eye on her third eye, and then that's when she goes and battles Joy and tries to get away, destroy the bagel, whatever she's doing. So it's like, it's all this clever stuff in there, and even just like there's lots of things which are circular throughout the film. The film is like got motifs of that kind of stuff going on. They work in a laundromat. Everything's going round in circles. Their life's going round in circles. There's like circular mirrors all over the place. And there's moments where you see characters in those mirrors, which gives them more distance. Like when you first see Waymond, he's talking to Evelyn, and you just see his reflection in one of the mirrors that shows their sort of distance and things like that. It's so clever in how they put all of this craziness in there. And on the surface, it looks like it's just part of the visuals, but there's more going on. And I think the more you watch this, you'll get more of that kind of stuff.
On Waymond, so I was talking about Evelyn and Joy being the emotional core of the movie, but that's not to do down Waymond's input and Ke Huy Quan, I hope I'm saying that right, the actor that plays him, who I have not seen in anything since Indiana Jones, but it immediately recognised him, had to look him up like as soon as the film ended. But it's not even like recognising him, it was recognising his voice. His voice hasn't changed since 1984. But he's amazing. Like, and I've looked him up since. He's like he dropped off. He not dropped off, but he's had a career as a stunt person rather than as an actor. He's had limited roles as an actor and done most of his work in stunts. But just so seemingly coming out of nowhere in this film to give this incredible performance that is the other emotional anchor of the film, because and I specifically mean the Waymonds who do not jump between multiverses, although he gets to be a cool badass showing off his stunt skills. Yeah,
the fight with the Americans would call it a fanny pack, we call it a bum bag.
The bum bag,
yeah, the bum bag fight. Amazing. And that's all him. Like the majority of that is him. Yeah. Like, and I didn't realize he was a stunt performer beforehand. That's really
what he's been doing for like the last 30 years, basically.
So good.
And not had a lot of acting work because clearly he doesn't need it because he's probably getting quite good work as a stunt coordinator. But that's cool. That's cool when he's able to do the fight scenes. That brings a lot of fun action to the film. But specifically his performance as the Waymonds who do not do stuff like that, the Waymonds who are just Evelyn's husband, trying to divorce her and struggling in their marriage, just incredibly moving, very sweet, very believable performance from him, that keeps a lot of it anchored in the universes where the Evelyns come from. Although it's much more complicated for Evelyn and Joy, but there needs to be a strong performance from him to remind us why she doesn't want to completely disappear into this multiversal existence with Joy, and that there's a family unit there. Primarily it's her and Joy's relationship, but Waymond is a part of that, and he's a rock, I think, an emotional rock for Evelyn, but I felt it as a audience member for me.
Yeah, and like he doesn't want to divorce her though as well, does he? He's only doing that because his friends said that's how they had the conversation. But I think that's important as well, isn't it? Because he's constantly trying to win Evelyn over in every universe, and he always wants to be with her, even in the universe where she's this big Hollywood star and everybody loves her, and then they still meet each other again, and he's like, well, I would have been just happy just living with you in a laundromat, like, and that could have been our life.
Even though you've broken my heart once again, I just want you to know I would have been happy doing laundry and taxes with you. That line was amazing, and that version of Waymond is amazing because he's very suave, but he's still carrying all the awkwardness and heartbreak of every Waymond that meets every Evelyn, basically. Even though he's like a successful businessman and, quite cool. That line, that was a devastating line of dialogue. It was brilliant.
Yeah. But of course, that's what makes Evelyn realise what she's got as well. And the whole thing is about her realising the people around her that she's kind of been neglecting because she's so in like having to make the taxes work, having to sort of provide, having to make her father happy because she feels like she's let him down. And also like the guy who plays the father, James Hong, he's great as well. He's like an amazing actor who's been in lots of stuff. Like I always think of Big Trouble in Little China, but there's lots
I immediately
of stuff.
I immediately go to the Seinfeld episode. There's a very famous Seinfeld episode called The Chinese Restaurant where, have you seen that one?
I haven't seen that one, no.
The whole episode takes place in real time. They're just trying to get a table at a Chinese restaurant for half an hour, and he's the like manager or concierge or whatever who is kind of letting some groups in to get a table, but not letting the group in. It's a real classic Seinfeld episode, and he's a big role in that. But yeah, he's like, I mean, he must be one of the most like prolific actors of all time because he's been in like hundreds of movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's great in this as well, isn't he?
Yeah, and sort of again when he realizes about Joy and the fact that she is gay and like meets her girlfriend, he's fine with it, isn't it? Like once he's understood what's going on, then he warms up, which I think is great. And of course he's in Blade Runner as well, isn't he?
Who is he in Blade Runner? Is he the scientist that in the kind of cryo room that makes the eyeballs?
That's the guy. He has literally been in everything. But yeah, great to see him in this film.
I think he might also be I think he might play like Jackie Chan's uncle or grandfather in did you ever watch the
animated
cartoon
series? Yes,
yeah. I'm pretty sure he's that. Yeah. And I think it looks like him, like it's modelled after him as well.
You know, they were going to get Jackie Chan to play the lead character in this at one point.
Really?
Yeah.
I could see him in like a Waymond role rather than a main character
But
role.
I think they realised that it would work better with a female lead, and sort of having that mother-daughter relationship as well is very important. And I think, it would have been a completely different kind of film. I
mean, it would have been more of a martial arts film, and that would be fun. I'm always happy to see a Jackie Chan film, but I couldn't imagine this film with anyone but Michelle Yeoh in the main role. She's truly amazing. She really understands the task of playing an infinite number of characters while also communicating a consistent character amongst that, or a consistent amalgamation of characters, and being able to carry like this put upon weight of the world on her shoulders laundromat owner with also basically an action hero. Like it's just an amazing performance. Yeah. There's several amazing performances, but she's at the center of this film, and she's brilliant.
Oh, definitely. And I think the fact that she is known now as being like a serious actor as well. If you'd had Jackie Chan, you would have expected the comedy. I think having her in this lead role, some of the comedy stuff, you can imagine them having conversations with her about all of the crazy shit that's going to happen in this film and being like, right, there's going to be a scene where people have butt plugs which are like trophies and stuff, and then having a fight, and their whole point, they're just trying to shove these things up their arse the entire time. And then there's like another scene with like nunchucks, which are just massive dildos, and all of this like mad stuff they must have had to say to her. Like, this is what's going to happen in one part of the film, and then you're going to have hot dog fingers and like be touching Jamie Lee Curtis on her face and stuff with these crazy fingers.
I have to say, I was laughing out loud in the cinema quite a lot on my own, and I don't actually laugh out loud when I'm on my own very much. But I was really laughing a lot watching this. But I was like, I think I was the only one in my cinema laughing. It was quite an empty theatre. There was maybe like less than 15 people, but no one else was really laughing that much. I was the only one like actually getting big hoots out of it.
Yeah, I was doing the same, and I was trying to sort of like keep it back a little bit, because again, I had the similar sort of thing. There were a few people laughing in the cinema, but we obviously just didn't go to good enough screenings, Matt. We needed like a big raucous audience.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want that. But I felt a bit bad being, I don't want to be the loudest person in a cinema. That's embarrassing. But yeah, it's fine. Maybe my fellow cinema goers didn't land with them.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I had a smile on my face throughout the whole film, except for the emotional bits when I was like, oh. But it was like, yeah, it had that. It's got so much to it, which I just love. And so I talked about the trophy fight with yeah. Were there any other big moments for you and like in set pieces that you really enjoyed?
We already talked about like Alpha Wayman's first big fight, but like linked to that, Alpha Wayman's like introduction before the fight, where we're getting glimpses into a kind of Jobu Tupaki death cult universe that's in the IRS building. I like that mix of the sort of flashes of horror. It reminded me of, have you ever read the comic book Crossed?
No.
It's sort of zombie adjacent, but they're not zombies. They might be infected with something, but the villains, it's like an infection that just turns normal humans into like bloodthirsty killers obsessed with killing. So it's very, very violent, but they've got this kind of death cult element, and I think they've all got like a cross like slashed into their foreheads in that. So with the stapled on bagel drawing, which you don't know is a bagel at that point in the film, it's just an ominous kind of logo. The flashes into that universe were great. But my definitely my absolute favourite universe was the two rocks on the edge of a gorge in a universe where life didn't develop.
That was so interesting as well. And that's the only place where Joy finds any peace as well, because there's nobody there and she doesn't have to worry about everyone else's thoughts and how they're responding to her. And that's when she like is at peace. I found that so interesting. And then just that really deep conversation they're having in subtitles as rocks in this desert. And it's just like, that moment is so good.
And it's kind of midway through the movie as well, isn't it? When it's quite high octane. And then they just kind of, aren't they hopping between and Jobu's like chasing Evelyn or vice versa? But then they just kind of plop into that universe and it completely breaks the pace of the movie. But it's quite a satisfying feeling. The juxtaposition of the momentum of the film when we land in that universe, it allows the emotional conversation they're having to have even more impact, because there's a kind of it's impactful the way we land from a very kinetic moment into a very static shot. It allows more heft for the emotional dialogue. And
I mean, it's got extra heft as well, because in that universe, Joy actually kills herself, doesn't she? She throws herself off of the cliff as this rock.
She throws herself off because she's attempting to kill herself in all universes at that moment, isn't she? Because that's when I think that's when she's walking into the bagel, isn't it? In the sort of main original universe. And as that's happening, I assume she's doing it in all universes, because that's when the rock jumps off the ledge, I think.
I'm not 100%, but there are moments like, I think this is the darker side of what's going on in this film as well. Like, you talked about sort of the nihilism and of like Jobu Tupaki and like her character, but the thing is, she's dealing with like bad depression, and like it's leading to self-harm at this point. And all of this kind of stuff. And it's kind of like, if you think about it in a different way as well, like if this was just happening in the Evelyn we know's universe and her daughter was just going through all of this, she wouldn't know. And then that could have led to her death. So it's got all of that element to it as well. Like, she's not just this woman who wants to destroy the world because she doesn't see any point in it. She's deeply sad about the way her life has gone.
Well, yeah, that's like the big reveal kind of at the end of the first act, isn't it? Jobu Tupaki's not trying to destroy the multiverse as the Alphaverse characters believe or claim. She just wants to destroy herself because she's so depressed that she's not been able to find any joy, and ironically her name is Joy. She's not been able to find any joy in any version of herself across the entire infinite multiverse. There's not enough there, and she's found no love from any kind of mother that she's visited. There's a horrible sort of thing to get your head around, isn't it?
Yeah, but then because of all of the other stuff that's going on, I think sometimes you forget about those kind of elements that are happening in the film, because there is so much laughter and comedy and absurdness going on. But at the root of it, like I said at the start, it is this sort of family drama, and it's this really intense family drama that's happening in this group.
Yeah.
But it is funny when they've got nunchuckers and dildos and things like that going on.
Yeah, it absolutely is a very funny film. But I think that's one of the things I like most about it, is that it balances those things up.
Yeah, definitely. And I was very emotional at the end. Like in the cinema, sat on my own watching this film. After all of the laughs and stuff, it struck a chord. And I think that's when I know a film has done its job for me. Like I talked about like my love of Eternal Sunshine a lot on the podcast, and that's one of my favorite films. And this has all of that DNA, but it's also got a lot more action, a lot more sort of extra comedy stuff going on, but it's all rooted in this sort of deeply personal story about this mother and daughter.
Yeah, I thought it was excellent. I'm really looking forward to seeing it again when it comes out for streaming. I'll definitely be watching this one again. It definitely warrants an extra watch, doesn't it? Because it's sort of exhausting to watch, isn't it? The degree of stuff on screen, and it's very difficult to take it all in. You have to let it wash over you a little bit, I think, first time you see it, don't you? But it's going to be very rewarding to rewatch and understand things a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you go in again, there'll be stuff that you noticed that you didn't pick up on the first time, because you also know the trajectory of the story.
Yeah.
And that always changes like your perception of it on a second viewing or third viewing or fourth viewing or continuous viewings.
Here, all we get are a few specks of time where any of this actually makes any sense.
Then I will cherish these few specks of time.
Well, that wraps up our episode on Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. What a film. Fantastic to see Sci-Fi getting the acclaim it deserves at the Oscars. Great to revisit our discussion here on the main feed. Now, we will be back later this week where we are returning to our space opera series. We will be discussing the Star Wars trilogy. Yes, we will be looking at all three films that made that series so iconic. We will be discussing Star Wars A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. So keep a lookout for that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Journey Through Sci-Fi.
You can find us at journeythroughsci-fi.com, where you can find links to our social media and join the conversation.
If you've enjoyed what you've heard and want to support us, why not leave us a review on your podcast app of choice? It really helps new people find the show.
You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/journeythroughsci-fi, where you can receive exclusive bonus episodes every month.
Don't forget to subscribe to the show, and we'll see you again next time for another Journey Through Sci-Fi.